Chapter 10. The fluffy clouds that had dotted the morning sky had multiplied and blocked the sun by the time Jessica and Winston finished their shelter and set off into the woods to collect wood and food. "I'm glad we built that lean-to first thing," Jessica told Winston, looking apprehensively at the darkening sky. "Or rather, I'm glad you gave me a good kick in the behind and made me help." Winston grinned. "I knew if I handled you right, I'd have you eating out of my hand eventually," he joked. "You better watch out or I'm going to kick your behind," Jessica threatened with a pretend scowl. She chased Winston a few yards and then slowed down to a walk. "Phew, I don't have any energy," she observed. "I'm so hungry I feel weak." "Me too." Winston stopped to pick up a piece of dry wood, just the right size for a campfire. "If I were home in Sweet Valley, I'd probably be on my way to the Dairy Burger with Kara and Lila and Amy right now," Jessica reminisced. "I'd order a burger with everything on it, fries and a chocolate malt. I can almost taste it." Just thinking about such delicious, unattainable fare made Jessica's stomach feel twice as hollow. Winston licked his lips. "I'd probably go home and stuff myself with microwave popcorn. That is, if I didn't stop at Guido's Pizza Palace on the way." Jessica shook her head, trying to forget the image of hot, crispy French fries doused with ketchup. "We shouldn't torture ourselves like this," she lectured Winston. "We should be getting ourselves psyched to eat berries and oranges. Just think of how healthy we'll look. It's like one of those low-cholesterol diets." Winston groaned. "Just what I need." They each spotted a good piece of firewood at the same moment. Winston insisted on carrying Jessica's log as well as those he'd found. She was glad to hand it over. Her mind was occupied with another issue. "Hey, Winston," she began. "Talking about the Dairy Burger makes me wonder what's going on at home. We've been so busy building the shelter and all, I haven't had any time to think about much else. Do you suppose everybody's really worried about us by now?" Winston bent over, carefully balancing his armload of firewood, and added another branch to the stack. "Probably," he guessed. "I mean, they've got to be. But they've also got to figure that we'd made it to dry land. There's no such thing as an uncharted isle, no matter what they say. Wherever we are, you can bet it's on the map, and they'll find it." Jessica hoped that was true, but the island certainly seemed remote and undiscovered to her. She and Winston hadn't come across any signs that people had been there before them. All along, Jessica had been assuming that she would be rescued as a matter of course. But she hadn't thought beyond the rescue itself, to her family and friends waiting at home, not knowing where she was or if she was even alive. She almost liked the idea of being mysteriously lost at sea, with everyone fussing and worrying and talking about her. People magazine would probably want her story when she got back to civilization. It was too bad it had to cause her family pain, though. Jessica suddenly saw a group of orange trees nestled among a grove of small, stubby palms. "Hey, Winston, hold on," she called. "I'm going to pick some of these." Taking off her gauze shirt, Jessica used it as a sling, quickly filling it with a dozen of the ripest-looking pieces of fruit. Then she rejoined Winston and displayed her harvest proudly. "So, have I earned my first badge?" she joked. "Nice going," Winston praised her. Then, shifting the bundle of firewood precariously onto one arm, he held out his left hand. "Here, give me that. I'll carry it." "It's all right, I can manage," Jessica assured him. No, I insist." Winston grabbed the makeshift bag from Jessica. "It's the man's job to carry stuff," he said gallantly, "and to protect you frail, delicate women." Jessica laughed. She was more athletic than Winston by far, but she wasn't going to argue. She was getting off easy. 2 more pieces of firewood later, Winston looked as if he had reached his carrying capacity. But like a true macho man, he wouldn't admit it was too much for him. "Why don't we head on back?" Jessica suggested, taking pity on Winston. "We've got enough wood and fruit. If we catch a few fish back on the beach, we'll be set for the rest of the day." "Never say die," Winston declared, blinking as a drop of sweat rolled into his eye. "I'm game to go a little further. And besides, I think this hill here," he gestured with his chin toward a narrow, rocky rise to their left, "corresponds to that cliff I saw from the beach when I went for a walk this morning. And from the beach it looked like there was a ton of great-looking fruit bushes up on that cliff. They might even be blueberries." "Blueberries, huh?" Jessica eyed the bluff skeptically. It was steep and dark, and who knew what was at the top? "I don't know, Winston," she said, shaking her head. "Climbing that hill could be more trouble than it's worth. Do you really think we need more fruit?" Winston seemed to enjoy Jessica's nervous hesitation. It gave him an opportunity to stick his chest out and act brave. "I'll lead the way," he announced. "You'll thank me later when we're eating those blueberries." Jessica gave in with a sigh. Winston was in the Lewis and Clark explorer mode again, and there was no use arguing with him. A low rumble of distant thunder met their ears as they started up the hill. Jessica picked her way carefully among the rocks and tree roots, keeping her eyes peeled for lizards and snakes and other disgusting tropical things that might be crawling around, waiting to grab her bare toes. Even without carrying anything, she found it rough going. Winston, meanwhile, was breathing heavily but doing his best to maintain an air of effortlessness. After 10 minutes of steady climbing, they found themselves at the top of the bluff. "I had no idea we were this high," Jessica gasped, both thrilled and frightened. Far below them, the gray ocean dashed against the shore, the big waves booming with a hollow, echoing sound. A thin strip of lightning flickered among the rain clouds on the horizon. "I think we'd better pick those blueberries and get out of here," she added, crossing her arms across her chest and shivering in the cool breeze. "Gotcha." Winston looked around and then made his way along the edge of the cliff. "Just a little further, Jess. I can see the blueberries right over there." With a gulp, Jessica followed. She didn't like being so near the edge of the cliff. It was a long way to the beach below. "Bingo!" Winston exclaimed triumphantly. "What did I tell you? Blueberries galore!" As soon as the words left his mouth, Winston froze on the cliff in front of her. Jessica, who had picked up her pace in her eagerness to grab some berries and go back down to their shelter, walked right into his back and accidentally bumped her nose on his bony shoulder. "Ouch! Winston, what are you doing?" Jessica asked as she rubbed her nose, annoyed. In answer, Winston let out a strangled yelp. Jessica looked over his shoulder to find out what had stopped him in his tracks. Had the headhunters found them at last, she wondered, her heart beating wildly. Something large and dark and furry was blocking the path. Even from a distance, Jessica could see its sharp teeth, bared and glinting. The claws on each of its paws looked as long as her fingers, perfect for tearing a person from limb to limb. "A bear!" Jessica shrieked, her eyes wide with horror. She was as frozen with fear as Winston, her hands clutching his shoulders. "It's a bear!" she repeated dumbly, her mouth going dry. The bear was standing on its back legs by a blueberry bush. Then, with an angry growl, it dropped to all fours and started shuffling toward them. Jessica was too frightened to scream, and some instinct told her that the best strategy might be to stay calm and quiet. Although she knew it was a terrible thought, she couldn't help being glad that Winston was positioned between her and the bear. Jessica had begun to get a grip on herself, but Winston had lost all of his composure. Looking pale and panic-stricken, he whirled around to run away from the bear. "Watch out, Winston!" Jessica whispered fiercely. Wobbling precariously near the edge of the cliff, Winston dropped everything he'd been carrying, including Jessica's shirt that she had used as a sling to carry the fruit. Still waving his arms wildly, Winston charged past Jessica and took refuge behind her. Now there was nothing between Jessica and the bear but a few feet, a very few feet of grassy earth. Even the day before, capsized in the stormy sea, Jessica hadn't been as frightened. Her life jacket had saved her when she was thrown from the boat, and even though she had lost the jacket, her swimming skill had gotten her to the island. But now she had no weapon, no skills, nothing to save her from the bear's powerful jaws. She couldn't fight a bear the way she had fought the ocean waves. Jessica stared at the fierce animal, wishing it would disappear, prove a figment of her imagination. Who'd have thought they'd run into a bear up there? She had been prepared for boa constrictors, even a cannibal or two, but not a bear. Then Jessica noticed something. The bear had stopped loping toward them and was now standing on its hind legs again, looking past her. Its big black nose twitched hungrily. The fruit, Jessica thought. It's after the fruit, not us. She turned to look behind her. Sure enough, Winston was cowering next to a bush laden with berries. Jessica faced the bear again. All of a sudden, she recalled Mr. Russo's lecture on island flora and fauna from the week before. He had said something about black bears once indigenous to the coastal region, but now extremely rare on the California mainland. Jessica took a closer, calmer look at the bear. It was small, not even as tall as she was. Not exactly a grizzly, she thought. But a bear was still a bear, and this one was hungry. She and Winston had to take action before it decided to have them for dinner instead of berries. Jessica thought of a solution. Winston, the bear isn't interested in us. It's just trying to get the fruit next to you. Pick some and throw it over the bear's head. It'll go after the fruit and we can escape, she frantically explained. But Winston was still completely petrified. He didn't move or speak in response to Jessica's command. She would have to distract the bear on her own. Reaching over and grabbing a handful of berries, Jessica lobbed them over the bear's head. The bear sniffed, curious, but didn't turn around. Jessica tossed a second handful. This time some of the berries hit the bear in the nose. The bear let out another low growl, its black eyes glinting. "Rats!" Jessica muttered desperately. She ripped an entire branch off the bush and prepared to hurl it. This time she absolutely had to get it right. There was no time left. She wasn't an expert on wild animal behavior, but she knew a bear about to charge when she saw one. At that instant, a deafening crack of thunder split the air around them. As if a switch had been pulled somewhere, the rain started abruptly. It came down in sheets, and Jessica was soaked to the skin in a matter of seconds. With a frustrated bellow, the bear spun around on its paws and lumbered off into the trees in the opposite direction. "Come on, Egbert, let's get out of here," Jessica shouted. But Winston still didn't move. He was shaking like a leaf, his eyes as wide as saucers. Jessica grabbed his arm and gave it a tug. Winston stumbled forward in a daze. Taking Winston's hand and holding it tightly in hers, Jessica led the way in an out-and-out sprint down the hillside. The rainstorm rattled the palm leaf walls of the shelter, but inside it had stayed warm and dry so far. Jessica had collapsed on the makeshift sofa on her side of the vine curtain and was now wringing the water out of her dripping hair. Winston, in the meantime, had slunk into his own side without saying a word to Jessica. Once she had caught her breath and gotten over the shock of encountering the bear, Jessica began to feel hungry again. The rain was still falling steadily. It could last for hours. One thing was for sure, she couldn't get any wetter. She might as well make another trip to the orange grove. A few oranges would tide her over for a while at least, she decided. "Hey, Winston," she called. There was no answer. Jessica peered through the vines. She could see Winston sitting with his back to her and his shoulders slumped forward dejectedly. "Winston, Do you want to walk with me to the orange trees and get a snack? She tried to make a joke, hoping to lift his spirits. I hear they're having a rainy day special. All you can eat for free. He still didn't answer. If anything, Winston's shoulders had slumped down even further. It was as if he were trying to sink right into the sand and disappear. Then it struck Jessica. Winston was probably still scared. He was afraid to go back into the woods and run into another bear. For a few seconds, Jessica fought to stifle a giggle. Some he-man, she thought, recalling how Winston's bravado had vanished in the face of the bear. Then the urge to laugh passed, and Jessica felt guilty. She had been as frightened as Winston, only she'd had the presence of mind to get out of there. And Winston had been so sweet and thoughtful all day. He had shared his food with her that morning, even though she had acted like a snob. The least I can do is share something with him, she decided. Jessica got to her feet. Winston, I'm going out anyway. I don't mind the rain. I'll bring you back some oranges. I don't want any, Winston grunted, still not looking in her direction. But you've got to be starving, Jessica argued. Seriously, it's no problem. I can use a palm leaf to carry them and bring back a whole bunch. I can't take anything from you, Winston said in a low, mournful voice. He heaved a big sigh. I don't deserve anything. I dropped all our food and firewood and your shirt. I ran away from the bear. I'm a failure. Winston! Jessica exclaimed. She barged through the vines into his half of the shelter. Don't be an idiot. Well, it's true, isn't it? Winston faced Jessica, an embarrassed expression on his face. I acted like a big coward. I'm a failure, he repeated. Jessica shook her head vigorously, her wet hair swinging. I can't believe you. She sat down on the palm fronds next to Winston and gave his arm a shake. Just because you made one mistake. And believe me, I wasn't exactly running up to give that bear a hug myself. That doesn't mean you're a failure. It doesn't? Winston sounded as if he would like to be convinced. No way! You know perfectly well that if it hadn't been for you, I'd be sitting out there in the rain waiting for the rescuers. She flashed Winston a teasing smile. I might still have the shirt that you dropped over the cliff, but that's about all I'd have. Without you, I wouldn't have known the first thing to do. You really mean that? Winston mumbled. Do I ever? Jessica said sincerely. I'd be hungry, wet, lonely, and scared. You took charge and we got something done. I really admire that. Winston sat up a little straighter. He ran a hand through his hair, smoothing it self-consciously. Yeah? Yeah. Now that Jessica knew Winston was feeling better about himself, she couldn't resist kidding him a little bit. But Winston, you should have seen your face up on the hill just now. She doubled over, unable to suppress her pent-up laughter any longer. You looked like an extra in the Night of the Living Dead. Winston didn't laugh along with her. Instead, he looked hurt. Jessica stopped giggling and gently put a hand on Winston's arm. Sorry, Winston. I didn't mean that. I was just trying to be funny. I guess I should leave that department to you, huh? Winston cracked a weak smile. I guess so. They sat for a few minutes in silence, listening to the patter of raindrops on the roof. Then Winston cleared his throat. Thanks, Jessica, he said somewhat shyly. Thanks for cheering me up. Hey, it was nothing! She punched him lightly on the shoulder. And besides, I meant every word I said. I do admire you. Winston shook his head with a disbelieving smile. You know, if anyone had ever told me I'd hear Jessica Wakefield say something like that to me, I'd have thought they were crazy. Jessica laughed. Am I all that bad? She asked. Well, Winston hesitated. I've got to admit, I always thought you were sort of, a little bit of a snob. Jessica raised one eyebrow and gave Winston a furious look. She knew she couldn't really get mad at him. It might sting a little, but he was telling the truth. "Well," she said, deciding that it was time for true confessions. She could at least get a lick in. "I always thought you were a complete goon." Winston chuckled. "You've got me there," he confessed. "I'm guilty as charged. But you know, it's not always a barrel of laughs being the class clown." Jessica groaned at the joke, but Winston continued. "I mean, it's like any label, I guess. I'm the class clown, so I always have to do something funny. I have a reputation to live up to, you know? And sometimes I know I go overboard with it." Winston looked to Jessica for confirmation. "Like yesterday on the field trip. I was driving you crazy playing pranks on you, wasn't I?" Jessica nodded. "But now that I think about it, I was mostly annoyed because you kept getting in my way when I was trying to flirt with Ken," she admitted. "If it hadn't been for that, maybe I'd have had a better sense of humor about it." She twisted a strand of damp hair around her index finger. "Well, I guess we've learned something about each other, huh?" "You bet." Winston leaned back against the rocks, his hands deep in his pockets. Neither of them spoke, but Jessica knew his thoughts were running along the same lines as hers. She had found out that Winston had a strong side as well as a silly one. Maybe he had panicked at the sight of the bear, but he was still generous, responsible, and forgiving. She could tell that he had come to appreciate her, too. And she had a feeling that when, or was it if, they returned to Sweet Valley High, their relationship would never quite be the same. Without a word, Winston slipped his arm around Jessica's slender shoulders and gave her a friendly squeeze. Side by side, they settled back on the palm leaves to wait out the storm. End of chapter 10.